Hi everyone, Pam Gregory, astrologer. I'm going to be talking about my favorite subject today, further thoughts on creating our reality. And this is a subject that really drives me, drives my work, drives so much. And I know I've spoken about this extensively before. Some of the ideas I'm going to be sharing are very much what I've shared before, but I may be expressing them in a different way to help you. But I'm also going to be bringing in some new thoughts as well to develop my own thinking and hopefully to help you too. Because if we look at the world at the 3D level, the world is in the most enormous mess, probably in more of a mess than we've known in our lifetimes, and corruption is appearing everywhere. The war in the Middle East is just utterly horrific with the atrocities that are being inflicted on innocent people. You and I could have been born in the Middle East. It was just chance of birth. So for sure, this opens up our compassion. It opens up our hearts in a very big way. It's just unthinkable that we can do this to people. And so I have many people writing to me right now saying, what do I think about this? What can we do? Well, as I've said before, if we can help in practical ways on the ground, although that's extremely difficult, obviously we can do that. We can send that area a lot of love, for sure. But thinking about it in the bigger picture, I've got people writing to me now about this war, but 2 months later they were writing to me about another war that I'm not allowed to mention on this channel. But and before that there was another and another, and so if we look at it with a bigger picture, all of these terrible events, unthinkable events of war, poverty, misery, disease, death, the real atrocities in the world, they are all expressions of low frequency energy, all of them. That's non-debatable. And we need to get to the place where it is unthinkable to hurt another living being. Person, animal, for me, even the trees, I grieve. So if those awful, horrific things are all expressions of low frequency energy, then because consciousness is primary, it's fundamental, it's foundational, it's what everything comes from, we need to shift our consciousness. We need to transcend the hamster wheel, go beyond the hamster wheel of the war, the death, the poverty, the misery, the hunger. So that's really the solution, to shift our consciousness. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. And it isn't the people who initiate wars. Largely it's 99%, I would guess, of the global population want peace, they want enough food to eat, they want shelter, they want love and support of families and friends. That's what we all want. And when we can come together as one humanity, which ultimately we are, that will manifest. These things will happen, and then there will be safety for all, and the end of wars. When we have that sense of interconnectedness with all living beings, that's quite a kind of Buddhist philosophy, but that's where we're headed. And if we, for instance, watch the nightly news, I actually haven't had a television for years, so I haven't watched mainstream news for a very long time. But if you watch that, it appears that there is one prevailing, all-consuming reality. That's how it appears. And it's dramatic and it's colorful. And if everything begins with a thought, which we know it does, then if a big scary thought was proposed on the nightly news, instinctively as human beings we go into fear, and we therefore create more of what we think about. We obediently create, we become the action plan for that fear, even if nothing existed in the first place. I'd really, really, really like you to think long and hard about that. Because if most people follow those prevailing narratives in society, it appears to be the truth. That's that's what's happening, because you're surrounded by people who are also exposed to those narratives, and you see lots of evidence. You will always see evidence of your truth, always, because that's the way the world works. You'll find lots of facts and figures and evidence, and the people around you, the people you associate with, the people you go to work with, all are seeing that same reality. And so all of that reinforces the idea that there is only one reality, no others. And that's just not true. That's just not true. I know from my own experience. I live in a little up a gravel track backing onto an organic farm, and there are 10 houses in our little road. And I know by talking to my neighbours, who I talk to frequently, and mostly they're lovely people, that they have a completely different reality to me. I've talked about this before, that their view of health, of spirituality, of their entire worldview is very different to mine. And we're just a few yards apart, and they don't really know what I do. I think they think I watch Netflix and read Hello magazine all day, which is quite refreshing, actually. But their reality is very different. So it isn't geography that determines how we perceive our reality. And so there is no out there objective reality. That means there's no all-encompassing, all-consuming one set objective reality that's being played out. Our reality is created from in here. And many thought leaders who I respect greatly have talked about this for a long time. Dr. Joe Dispenza, Lynn McTaggart, Paul Levy, the Buddhist author, talks about this, that our reality is created from in here. And because we get more of what we think about all day long, we will get more fearful events and experiences coming in if we focus on fear. We will get more loving events and experiences coming in if we focus on love. And it really is that simple. So we have to make a very determined purpose of which end of that spectrum are we gonna focus on as we move through our days. So something else that many other emails that come through, and I'm sure many of you are feeling this or experiencing this, is, the emails about, so when is this going to be over? When is this going to end? And because it appears that that 3D reality is so grueling, so harrowing, so horrendous, and it is. There's no doubt about it. But it will be over once we have this inner shift. We will see more peace in our reality when we feel peace in our hearts. We will see more love in our reality when we experience more love in our hearts. And do that almost as a game, as an experiment. Just try it for a week or two. Make a very determined focus on peace or on love, and just see those little tiny interactions day to day, that stressful interactions become less so, and surprises happen in your day from people you wouldn't expect. I mean, this is something I work at a lot, particularly with the person who I call my greatest teacher, who was local to me. So therefore, and when we ask, when is this going to end, that is a 3D question. That instantly drops us into a lower frequency of lack, it's not here yet, frustration, impatience. We instantly drop down to that lower reality. And so we have to turn it around to really, really live knowing that we live from the inside out. Or up to now, we may have lived from the outside in, and being in victim consciousness and giving away our power and buffeted by external events and another thing and another thing and another thing and another thing, and know that those external events are going to get faster. They're going to get wilder through next year. They're going to get faster. They're going to come in tsunamis, until we can shift our focus to living from the inside out, not the outside in. We're never going to control. We're never going to us as a single individual, we cannot stop the war in the Middle East. But what we can do when we come together as a group, Lynn McTaggart is a superstar queen of this. If you read her book, The Intention Experiment, quite an old book now, but how she reduced violence in the Middle East, again, a few years ago when there was another huge upsurge of violence then, and she did it through meditation, instructing people in her group to meditate. So the group energy actually magnifies our intention. And when we can start to live from the inside out and get that feeling, not only do we feel more empowered, we're not living in victim, we're living in empowerment, we are also starting to live in freedom, because we stop thinking, when is it going to end? And what can I do to create my reality? And that's really different. What can I do to help create more peace in the world? What can I do right now, sitting on my sofa at home for free, to create more love in the world? That's really empowering. So this becomes a really exciting way to live for free. Each one of us, if you can come together with other like-minded people, even better, because once we shift internally, we will start to notice, as I say, all these little changes. We'll start to magnetize people on the same frequency, or opportunities or circumstances that we didn't kind of notice or have offered to us before, because life is an inside job. And we are really, really, really going to get this moving forwards, and that our realities are entirely subjective, and our reality only takes form when we interact and operate with these massive plasma waves of divine intelligence, divine consciousness that are out there and we think are just invisible. Because that's how it works. So if we interact with fear, we're going to get more fear. If we interact with love, we're going to get more love. Look at the work of Veda Austin, if you haven't done so, in more depth, because what she is literally showing, it's visual in her water crystals, what happens as we're interacting with water, in terms of reflecting our thinking and our emotions. And it's just beautiful work, but it's incredibly profound work, because she is referring to water now as God consciousness, that we are ingesting, that we are excreting. We are just a flow of God consciousness. And that's just so beautiful. So it isn't that reality is out there as a separate thing and we are all separate beings, although that has been very much, I think, encouraged. It's created in here, and therefore we're in a constant feedback loop, a constant flow with divine intelligence, divine consciousness, and our own individual frequency. Just think of it like an infinity loop. It's a constant divine flow, in, out, in, out. We're not even aware of it. It's happening 24/7. So what the indigenous people live like this. This is their entire worldview and their philosophy. There's also the worldview very much of the Lemurians, that everything is oneness. We are all fractal expressions of the oneness of source, of the divine. And so for indigenous people, and it would be really helpful if we could think like this too, it isn't that mind and matter are separate. It's just a flow. It's a spectrum of density. It's a spectrum of density from the invisible to the visible. But I know from all my research, and Dr. Joe Dispenza has talked about this, that if you flew through each of us, each of our bodies, with a camera taking photographs all the time, there'd be almost nothing on the film at the other end, because we're just vibrating energy. And I don't know about you, but I certainly feel this when I have a healing session, a Reiki session. Within seconds, warmth, my body is no longer solid. It's just waves of vibrating energy. I can feel that. So if we apply a kind of structure to this, let's say, we have all this incredible crystalline plasma out there in the Kordylewski clouds, as they're called. And Professor Robert Temple writes about this in his magnificent, groundbreaking book, A New Science of Heaven. And that is pure potentiality, that's pure possibility. So think of that energy as stem cells almost, and a stem cell can turn into anything, can turn into an ear, a nose, a toe, it can, because it's just pure potential. It can take on the form of whatever shapes it. And then if you think of almost how a transformer steps down to the next layer, that pure potentiality of the crystalline plasma is shaped by the probability waves of the prevailing astrological archetypes. The prevailing astrological archetypes. Because astrology is a language of mathematical probability, as I've often said. It's not a language of specifics, of guarantees, if you like, because it's 50% of the picture, and then we then have to interact with those astrological archetypes to make things manifest. So the first stepping down in the transformer from the pure potentiality is the probability waves of the architectural of the astrological archetypes at the time, what patterns they're forming, where are they falling in the heavens, and they give us the next shaping, let's say, of possible manifestation. And the next stepping down in the transformer is okay with that astrological pattern, those archetypes. How are we then bringing them into manifestation through our intention, our visualization, and very importantly, our frequency, our state of being? Are we in fear or are we in love? So those are the kind of steps by which we start to manifest our reality. So you can almost see it as a science, because we can take that sheet of music, as I've often described it, of the prevailing astrology, and we can murder it, butcher it, or make it magnificent, depending on it's our frequency that determines how harmoniously and beautifully that comes into manifestation. So this to me becomes very interesting, because this means that the inner and the outer are actually inseparable. They are one flow of consciousness. And we are the co-creators, the activators, the producers of our individual realities, but we're also contributing to the collective reality in every moment. And that's why it's so important that we get together online or in person with like-minded people to say, okay, how do we create a more loving, a more beautiful, a more compassionate, and a more abundant world? And I would really, really, really recommend that we master this. Because next January, Pluto is moving back into Aquarius on the 20th of January. It'll spend 9 months of 2024 in Aquarius, and moves fully into Aquarius for 20 years in November 2024. That gives us the potential to think of the two jaggedy lines of the glyph of Aquarius. That gives us the potential of the mastery of our energy, our thinking, our feelings, all of our state of being. Or it allows us to give away, to sacrifice, to surrender all of that power to the outer world, let's say. So it is really, really important that we get the mastery of this, coming from our hearts, coming from love, coming from joy, coming from gratitude, coming from abundance. I want to shout this from the rooftops. But I think when I talk about these things, they feel so abstract, and until we've really started to feel them and kind of play with them as a game, experiment with them in our day-to-day lives. And despite what's happening out there in the 3D reality, we are actually embodying more light, many, many of us, than we have ever embodied before. because there's more light coming onto the planet, onto the earth. As we raise our consciousness, we can hold on to, we can embody more of that light than we've ever done before. Many people are talking about this and experiencing it. We are becoming more of the light body. And I'll never forget that very pin sharp, vivid dream I had when I saw myself as the light body. It was transformational and extraordinary. So thinking of this spectrum of density that we live in, we think of ourselves as solid matter, but in physics terms, that is very far from the case. And we are becoming less and less dense as we move forwards. We're becoming more and more of the light body. And gradually we are going to recognize that in ourselves. We're going to remember those gifts and skills of telepathy and healing and a sense of interconnectedness with all things. And increasingly we are going to be, I think to me, all ascension means is an expanded state of consciousness. I'm welcoming in an expanded love, an expanded consciousness. I'm welcoming it in, because ascension to me is just this sense of an expanded consciousness. And with that, we will get a greater sense of our multidimensionality. And our matter, our bodies, are actually just printouts of our consciousness. So if we have a problem with our knees, which I've had, as you know, in the recent past, or our shoulder or whatever, it's always a message from our consciousness that something is out of balance in our consciousness that's manifesting in the physical, because the physical is just a printout of our consciousness. But increasingly, with this expansion of consciousness, we are going to be moving from our left brain more to our right brain. We're going to be moving away from the way we've been taught in school, the details, the appointments, the living in linear time, the sense of separation from other people and the world. We're going to be living much more in our right brains, which is how spiritual people live, how indigenous people live, how the Lemurians lived. And there is a magnificent example of this to make it very real for you. I actually saw this video many years ago. This is from a TED talk. I'm sure many of you are familiar with TED talks. They always have to be kind of 20 minutes long, and they're either on scientific or alternative or spiritual topics. And this was a magnificent TED talk. I think it's one of the most viewed TED talks ever. It was filmed. It was made 15 years ago in 2008. And the lady who was talking is a very brilliant lady called Jill Nolte Taylor. And I'll put the link for this TED talk below. And ironically, in this, she at the time was working as a brain expert, as a neuroanatomist. I've never heard that term, neuroanatomist, but she was a very academic, a very intellectual lady working as a neuroanatomist and very familiar with the workings of the brain. And the video is called A Stroke of Insight. And it's only 20 minutes long. I cannot recommend highly enough that you watch this, and watch it, please, right to the end. It is magnificent. It is beautiful. It's articulate. It is profoundly moving, but it is also profoundly insightful for how we're living our lives and the shift that we are in the process of making as one humanity in this huge transformation. So I'll put the link for that below. I can't recommend highly enough that you take 20 minutes out in your life to watch that, because I think it could really change things for people. And remember the rolling mantra: I'm welcoming in an expanding consciousness of love. I'm welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love. I say that on my walks I'm going out in biblical rain every morning here in the UK. I go out every day, and that's my rolling mantra. And it does work. It helps to bubble wrap you, I think, from the worst excesses. And I don't mean that in a selfish way, not at all, because I'm beaming out my frequency to the collective. And if we could all start to feel that kind of energy, we are going to shift things beyond that hamster wheel. So we don't keep going round and round the hamster wheel of the horror, the hamster wheel of the horror. This has got to stop. And we, as humanity, in all of our numbers, all of our billions, we have the power to change the world. God bless. I hope some of that has helped you, and I'll be back very soon with an update. God bless. Bye for now.